our our very own um, Jeff and Deborah Kramer, who are playing Morty and Myrtle, and they are doing Purim in the Park. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Morty and Myrtle. They are longtime friends, and they meet on the park bench regularly, and they talk about so many things. But today is going to be a very interesting conversation. So let's join Morty and Myrtle, the Purim in the Park.
Hey, Morty, what's that you have in your hand? What's that book?
Oh, Myrtle, I found this book in the garbage this morning.
What's the name of it?
It's called the Bible.
The Bible. Wow, I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, it was a bestseller.
I forgot who wrote it.
There's got to be at least a dozen writers.
What? That's crazy. Who's the editor then?
Well, some people believe that God told the people what to write.
You believe in God? Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, my mom used to read to me every night from the Bible.
And did it put you to sleep?
Well, no, not really.
Okay.
It can be very action-packed. The story of Esther is one of my favorites.
Oh, Esther. I remember that one. That's where all the Jews are going to be killed off because of this anti-Semite.
How'd you know that?
Ugh, you know how the memory is. But I remember that one because they gave you cookies and fruits after the bad guy was conquered by the good guy, you know?
That's right. That's right.
But the one thing confused me about the book of Esther.
And that is?
God is never mentioned.
Oh, no. You must be mistaken. God's in all these books.
Not Esther.
How do you know this?
You know, that mind. You remember pieces of things from different parts of your life, and you can't even explain it. I just remembered another crazy thing about this Esther book.
And that is?
The hero is a woman, a queen, and she gets her name on the title of the book. That's rare for a girl back in those days.
That's absurd. A book in the Bible without God even mentioned? The hero is a woman? And she gets a book named after her? That's unheard of.
Okay, if you don't believe me, let's read it. Look up Esther in the table of contents.
Okay, here it is.
What's the title?
It's Esther. It is Esther. Wow. Let's read it.
Thanks for the book, Morty.
Okay.
Okay, in chapter 1, it tells us the king is throwing a wild party that goes on for 180 days.
180 days? That's impossible.
Do you remember the 60s?
Not really.
They didn't remember partying either.
What were they celebrating?
Well, that's the strange part. You see, the king was recently defeated by the Greeks. Personally, I think he just wanted to get drunk and forget this disaster.
You know what? He just got defeated. I feel bad for the guy.
Don't. He was ruthless. He was just trying to convince his guests, who read like a who's who of the empire, to give him more money and avenge himself against the Greeks.
Guy must have had a huge ego.
So big that his forehead could have been one full zip code.
Oh, okay. So tell me, what happened?
Well, I'm not sure how the fundraising was going for the king, but he was running a big deficit, deep in the red. Then he did something really crazy.
Don't tell me he lowered taxes.
Well, yes, but that's another story. Anyhow, they were all drunk, really drunk, when the king gets another harebrained idea. He's going to call his wife Vashti, who is supposed to be one of the most beautiful women in the world, to come into the party. He was just showing off another one of his possessions.
Yeah, okay. So what happened after that?
She refused to come.
Okay, she refused to come. So what's the big deal?
Nobody who enjoyed having their head attached to their neck refused the king. She was never seen again.
Got to be joking. For saying no? She was exed.
That was just the beginning of the problem. The king and his high officials figured that women from all over the empire would do outlandish things, such as saying no to their husbands.
Oh, I see the problem. Well, my wife told me no a lot of times.
In your case, she needed to.
All right, all right, all right. So what happened to equal rights?
They continued to be unequal. So let's get back to the story. The deal here was that the king had to save face.
Exactly, but what about the queen?
Her job was to say yes and to look pretty.
I'd like a job like that. Where do I apply for that?
Oh, come on. Don't be don't be silly. Be serious. The big problem with the queen's job is that nobody stays pretty.
Hey, haven't you heard of Botox?
Oh, stop it. Let's get back to the story. So the king's advisors met and drew up an edict that all the women in the empire needed to give honor to their husbands. And that's a direct quote.
Did it include the love and cherish thing?
Back then, it wasn't even a concept.
You must have been lonely, especially after getting rid of the queen.
Well, funny you should mention this, because the king and his officials voted for an empire wide beauty contest. Now, if you were picked to compete, the king would give you free beauty treatments for 1 full year, plus a small stipend, and you would get to live in the palace and possibly become queen.
Sounds like Miss America on steroids.
Whatever. Anyway, this beautiful young woman named Esther won the king's heart.
You mean the guy had a heart?
I threw in a bit of romance for you. Now, don't get me off track. You know I have a bad memory. The problem here was that Esther was a Jew.
Hey, what's the problem with being Jewish?
It's a big problem. We Jews have been the scapegoats of the world for decades and centuries and thousands of years.
I'm a Jew, and it's the least of my problems.
Morty, do you want to hear the story?
Yeah. Go on.
Okay. So Esther's cousin Mordecai raised her as an orphan and told her not to tell the king that she was Jewish.
That's not nice. You start out a marriage with secrets? No.
So you're an expert on marriage now? Well, of course the king picked Esther for his queen. And what do you think happened next?
They went on a honeymoon to the Bahamas?
Don't be ridiculous. He threw a huge party and gave gifts to everyone.
I thought the guy was broke.
Did that ever stop an official like the king from running a deficit?
No, I guess you're right.
Hey, Look at this. Esther's cousin Mordecai wouldn't bow down to the king's second in command, that guy Haman, that we always booed. That's pretty serious.
And why didn't Mordecai bow? Guy had back problems, bad knees, arthritis.
No, because he was a Jew. He must have known that Haman was an Agagite, a descendant of the Amalekites, enemies of our people for hundreds of years.
So he inherited hatred and prejudice?
Does that surprise you?
Uh, all right, so what happened after that?
Well, Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew. So he went to the king and he told him some really fake news, that the Jews did not keep the king's laws and that they should be wiped out.
Are we talking genocide here?
Yep. And then Haman sweetened the plot.
How did he do that?
He told the king he would chip in 10,000 pieces of silver.
How did he get that much money?
He dealt in futures. How ironic that he never lasted that long himself. Some future. But now the king signed Haman's edict into law, and it said that all the good citizens of the empire were to slaughter their Jewish neighbors.
Haman must have been salivating over this one. He could collect all the spoils and at least double his money. This guy's a shrewd investor, don't you think?
Yeah, it's like a legal way to steal. But don't get ahead of me. Now, the dates for the edict had to be set, and they had this ancient ritual of throwing small stones to see what and when they should do things.
You mean they were gambling?
Not exactly.
When you're throwing dice at a casino table, what do you call that?
I don't want to argue with you.
All right.
Can we get back to the story?
Yeah. By all means.
Now, the problem with signing these edicts is you can't change them, not even the king.
That's no problem.
What do you mean that's no problem? It's
Just-
a huge problem.
Yeah, just hire some smart lawyers. They can make something sound like anything. Or isn't anything sound like something?
I don't think they had lawyers back then.
What? A world without lawyers? What a concept.
Can we get back to the story?
Oh, of course.
Okay. Now the dates were set according to these stones called Purim, and the edict was fresh off the presses when Mordecai saw the flyer that told of the planned genocide. He got out his sackcloth and ashes and went into deep mourning.
Why couldn't the guy wear a nice Italian suit?
Mordecai, Mortie, back then when you were in mourning, the dust reminded the person of their humble beginnings and their end.
Can't be humble in a nice suit.
Oh, stop already.
I thought this was a short story.
It was. If you didn't try to play editor with every sentence I say. Ugh. Now Mordecai sends a message to Esther saying that she needs to talk to the king.
And what did she say?
Esther said that nobody goes to the king unless they go to the inner court and the king holds up his scepter. And if he doesn't hold it up, it's adios amigo, au revoir, sayonara. P.S. He had not sent for her in over a month.
In other words, she's scared to death about the king sending her to the chopping block with a dull axe.
Well, when you're dealing with an egotistical tyrant, that's a real fear. Let's just say she had reason to be concerned. But then Mordecai said in a rather strong language, and I quote, Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
Wow. That's deep. What faith? I think this guy knows something we don't know.
Okay. So Esther sends a note back to Mordecai calling for a 3-day fast. No eating, no drinking, no cheating for all the Jews in the whole city, including her maidens and herself. Everyone was fasting. And Esther said, "If I perish, I perish."
I admire people like that. I once tried to fast for 3 days, but I ended up eating triple. So, let's get back to this story. So, what happened at the end of the 3 days?
Well, she went into the king's throne room and prepared for the worst.
Yeah. So, what happened?
Well,
Come on. Tell me what happened.
he was pleased to see her and held out his golden scepter.
Man, I'm telling you, I have palpitations here, even though I know she's the heroine and the heroine can't die. I've seen all the old movies. So tell me, what happened next?
Well, the king was so happy to see her, he made this outlandish offer. "What is it, my beauty? I will give you up to half my kingdom." Now, to be honest, the king was never any good at math, and he tended to exaggerate a bit.
What did Esther say? I'll tell you the truth, I would have made off with the cash. But wait, I remember something here. Didn't she invite the king and Haman to a party the following day?
Oh, Morty, how come you always remember things that have to do with food? But you're right. There are no historical records of this king ever saying no to a party invitation. He accepted quickly, and Haman also eagerly agreed. And after the party, the king, in another good mood, helped a little bit with the wine, renewed his offer to Esther. "What is your request? Up to half my kingdom."
Oh, and I remember more of this story now. This guy Haman had an ego so puffed up, it was bigger than the size of the empire. Now, on the way home from the party, Haman passed the king's gate, where everybody bowed to him, except you know who? Mordecai. And this infuriated him. So he went home and started fetching to his wife, as usual. What am I going to do about this Mordecai? His wife, the pacifist, told him, build a giant gallows, tell the king before brunch to hang Mordecai. Nothing like stimulating the appetite here.
Yes. But that same night, the king couldn't sleep, and he called his servant to bring him the king's chronicles. And he found that incident where Mordecai had exposed some servants plotting to assassinate the king. So in the morning, the king asked what had been done to honor this fine gentleman, and found out that nothing had been done. Suddenly, pitom, Haman arrives on the scene, planning to ask the king to hang Mordecai.
Oh, this is ironic. Now things are heating up.
The king asks Haman, "What should be done for the man the king wants to honor?" Naturally, Haman could only think that it must be him.
I think that's called narcissism.
Narcissism, you're right. Then Haman really goes crazy. He says the honored man shall wear royal robes, ride on the king's horse with a royal crown. And he went on like this for at least half an hour. And then the bomb.
All right, so what happened here? Come on now with the info.
Okay.
Don't be cruel.
Okay. The king said, do all these things for Mordecai, the Jew. And Haman's jaw nearly hit the floor. His tongue was loose like a long-tailed goose. He was in shock, but he couldn't take stock. Oh, now it's time for brunch, and Haman was the lunch.
I didn't know you rapped.
Oh, sorry. Well, after parading Mordecai around the city, Haman ran home to fetch to his wife about what had happened. She put it softly and sweetly to her husband. You're dead meat. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. It was the king's servant reminding him of his dinner date with the king and queen.
Okay. All right. So what happened?
Well, at the dinner, the king once again asked Esther what request she had, up to half his kingdom.
Wait. I remember. She really spilled the beans out on this one, telling the king that both she and her people were going to be wiped out from that edict, including Mordecai, the man he just honored. All of them be killed. And then the king, in his drunken stupor, was raging mad. He yelled, "Who could possibly do this?"
Yes. And then Esther pointed right to Haman. Meanwhile, let's forget about the fact that the king was the one who signed the edict into law. But the king stormed out of the room, and Haman threw himself on the mercy of the queen. Now, that mercy must have been right underneath her, because when the king re entered the room, he found them in a position that didn't look kosher at all.
Right. So they hung Haman on the gallows that he built for Mordecai. There goes his futures. Then the king, along with Mordecai, drew up a new edict that saved all the Jews of the empire. The Jews made a new holiday, called it Purim. And as you know, the king didn't mind at all celebrating another feast. But that's not the end.
Well, minus some rather major points, it is the end.
No, remember, you promised me that this was the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention God. You're right. Okay, you're right. Once in a while, you're right. But why? Why doesn't it mention it?
Let me see. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Now I get it. Esther just happened to win the beauty contest. Mordecai just happened to be at the king's gate at the specific spot and time where he just happened to hear of the assassin plot. And it just happened that the king couldn't sleep on the night before Esther revealed her big request. And they just happened to open the King's Chronicles up to where Mordecai was never rewarded. And 2 days earlier, the king just happened to be in a good mood and held out his golden scepter so that Esther could speak with him. What are the chances of this all being such a coincidence in such a few days?
Now,
Here,
now,
take the Bible. Look yourself.
now. I'm telling you, it would be mathematically impossible to have all these coincidences happen one right after the other. I guess God's name doesn't have to be written. The book of Esther speaks of him silently throughout the book. I know I forgot him all these years. God was hidden in plain sight. He's not a God who necessarily screams at you, at me, to get your attention. That's it. That's how it happened. The end.
No, no, it's not the end. It's the beginning. Look at that Bible. Thank you so much for rescuing it. You know that Esther must be my great, 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 great grandmother, and then some. And here am I, at the end of my life, all worried and anxious about death, while this young maiden teaches me what life's about. If I perish, I perish. Wow. God has been here all this time, and I didn't know it. God didn't hide himself. I did.
Right. Right. You see, Myrtle, when there's no way out, God's always there. But our hearts and minds are often closed to him. Look, both Mordecai and Esther, they face certain death. And so do we. And sooner than you think, my mother used to say. I don't think that any of those were coincidences that I found in this book.
I think, Mortie, I think God wanted us to find him.
Well, thank you, Mortie and Myrtle, for a great telling of Purim in the Park, or a great story of the book of Esther. Esther was a young Jewish girl in a faraway land. She was serving a king who didn't even believe in her God. It was a time when God must have seemed so far away, so absent. But God wasn't, as you so well pointed out. What a great reminder that we serve a God who will never leave us, who will never forsake us, regardless of our circumstance. It's not God who moves far from us. It is we who move far from God. What a great reminder of 2 Chronicles. And you put up the passage. Oh, so from Jeremiah 29, verses 12 and 13. Adonai, our God, declares, then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. We serve a God who wants to be found. We serve a God who is always there. And if we would only turn to him.